Assalamu alaikum, brothers. Welcome to another edition of Straight Talk. And today we have our three regular guests to discuss about elections. But I don't know about you, I've really had enough of elections. We've just had Brexit. Before that, we had the Scottish referendum. And then we had the general election before that. And to top it all up, we had in America the Trump elections. So we're here again. Another discussion on elections. I'm just going to lay down some ground rules. We Muslims, we love to discuss halal and haram. We love to discuss whether voting is halal or voting is haram. But really, I don't want that discussion in today's show. What I would like to discuss in today's show and try to understand in today's show is how governments work, how democracy works, and whether democracy gives us the solutions that we require, or we can look at different ways of how we can achieve what we want. Without further ado, I have three guests here today. We have Brother Nidal on my right, we've got Brother Samad, and Brother Abu Omar here as well. Welcome, brothers.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. So without further ado, Brother Nidal, if I can ask you firstly, just to lay down some, how and why has Theresa May called these elections? And what is it that she wants to achieve? Because I've heard so many things on the news that one thing is it's all about her interests, or she wants to have a better hand so that she can do negotiation in terms of Brexit. Would you like to highlight to us?
Well, the pattern which exists in the UK establishment, but also across Europe, various other European countries. The establishments are always pro-Euro, generally speaking, whereas the sentiments amongst the French population, the UK population, and elsewhere across Europe, such as Holland, there's almost an opposition to the idea of an EU. Now, the Euro elections, EU elections, they've already gone by. The public have voted for Brexit by a slim margin. And Theresa May, essentially what she's trying to do by pushing this election very early, and bear in mind she's done a U-turn because she did promise that she would not usher in early elections. Now she's done a U-turn on this. The Brexit referendum clearly, I lost my words. The Brexit referendum clearly swings in favour of a Brexit. What Theresa May is essentially trying to achieve is a very soft Brexit. So essentially she's going for a U-turn, not only in terms of bringing an early election, but also in terms of undermining the Brexit vote. Then we have other parties like Lib Dems, who have openly said in their manifesto they would bring about a second referendum on the issue of Brexit.
Brother, if I could bring you, Brother Samad. So is it soft Brexit that she wants, or is it her interest with a weak opposition?
I would argue it's the latter. I would think that, Labour going through what it's going through at the moment, the leadership contest and things like this, the party is very fragmented at the moment, and various polls have suggested that Labour is way behind. And here is an opportunity for the Conservative government to really, get ahead and secure, because this is the opportune time for the party to gain the lead and secure a long term, in office. And I would argue it's more to do with that and less to do with Brexit. So and it just goes to highlight that the interest of the people is actually not at the heart of this democratic politics. It's all,
Surely if she's got a better hand, she can do better negotiation with the European Union, and that's in the interest of the people.
That's one argument that is being put forward. But like I say, I would argue that it's more to do with, opportunism, where they can secure more power for themselves for the long term. And it's less to do with the interest of the people, what they want and what they need.
Okay, would you like to put your word?
Yeah, I'd just like to actually remind that Theresa May has come into the Conservative Party's premiership, but she actually inherited this. The
Yes.
British electorate did not actually, vote her into premiership. She inherited from David Cameron, and this is in 13th of July 2016. And she feels that, in order to go to negotiation with the Brussels, she understands that there will be a lot of ups and downs along the way. And it's possible that she will, like the brother has actually said, that she might opt for a soft Brexit or, otherwise. And there is a lot of room for, making mistakes. And at that time, she wants to actually make sure that she doesn't get any strong criticisms, or she needs to make sure that the whole nation is behind it. The whole nation has voted her in. So she is the all-powerful, and she's going out there, and whatever she does, she has the mandate of the people. I think this is why she has called in the general election, though she has swallowed her words, saying that she will not call for the general elections. And we've seen, for example, the dismal reactions of people in the society. For example, when BBC and all the other television cameras went in and interviewed the people, old ladies were really reluctant. They were really sort of like heartbroken in terms of oh, do we have another election? This is not good for the country. But it's all to do with her making her hands strong so that she can actually steer this Brexit negotiation in the direction that the corporate wants, not necessarily for the benefit of the people over here.
Brother Samad, you seem to have contradicted that. I mean, isn't that fact that she needs to prove herself, so she needs to have elections? So it's honesty. The other thing is, why I would like to add into this is what Brother Abu Omar highlighted was there is disillusionment in society, isn't it, about elections, and lots of people are dissuaded by voting.
Absolutely. There's a massive voter apathy that we can see, and it's on the rise. More and more people are disillusioned with this entire system and this process where they seem to achieve nothing. And the reason for this is actually what people are realizing is that the heart of this whole system is the corporate rule. And the options that are actually being presented to the people is which party do you favor to deliver this corporate rule for you. And in terms of what the rule is, there's no sort of like second option. And people are realizing this more and more. So, and we really need to look into that and really investigate the system and who is actually running the show.
Do you think she's honest in terms of she wants?
She's absolutely not honest. To be fair, it's not just her. This system breeds, politicians that are never honest. And we've seen this. I would say this because it's obvious. You find before the elections, you find these politicians. They come out with promises after promises. They talk about issues concerning the people, but straight after the elections, they just do exactly what they want to do or what they're told to do by these corporates, and they never, really consider. They have no consideration for, what the people are concerned about or how they're suffering and so on. I mean, if you look at the Conservative government, for example, you'll find that they are, continuously favouring like multinational corporations over NHS, over basic needs and rights of the people.
But we can vote them in and we can vote them out. So maybe Jeremy Corbyn is a better option. What would you say to that?
First of all, I'd like to say that democracy is quite sloganistic. We always tend to think it's just elections, but elections and democracy are two separate things. So, for example, France and Britain would be considered a democracy centuries ago, and yet at the same time, the common man was only given the vote until recently, in terms of the history of the UK once it became a superpower. And you find this to be the case for many democratic Western countries. They were democratic before elections came about. So elections does not necessarily mean democracy, and vice versa. So,
but my question is, through democracy, aren't we able to secure our rights? I mean, look at Saudi Arabia. If you compare it to two countries, Saudi Arabia, you probably, if you ask for your rights, you probably get locked up. But here, you can demonstrate, you can account the politicians, you can sit with them, and you can discuss where you want your community to go.
Yeah, can I just say, there's a statement that was made by Bertrand Russell, and he says, democracy is a process by which people are free to choose a man who will take the blame. You see, and that's exactly what you get. You know, each time you go through this process of elections, and then you appoint somebody to lead the nation. But this person is actually doing what the establishment, which is the corporate world, that is dictating to them in terms of delivering the policies and the direction and steering the nation. And then at the end of the day, you'll find that a different party will come and will make alternative, different promises. And the person who was in office will take the blame, and then they leave office. And this whole thing is, they wash their hands of it. It's nothing to do with the system. It's this individual, he's done it wrong, like we had Bush, like we had Blair, so it's all done and dusted.
What about
and that's democracy? Do you see it?
What about Abu Omar, if I bring you into discussion as well? What about the suffragettes? They've managed to achieve quite a few results through protests and discussions, and the slavery. I mean, this is all a credit to democracy, isn't it?
I mean, the suffragettes actually, yes, they did actually fought for their own rights, women's rights. But if you actually look at it, their rights is only given so that these women can actually go to the factories and work. Yeah, because at that time, during the World War, a lot of the men were actually busy fighting. A lot of the men were actually, died, and the society, these corporates needed, women manpower to actually grind their, engines in the factories and etc. So it was actually a clever and opportunistic move to give them their rights, some rights that women deserve. And women haven't actually, earned their rights as women. I was coming, for example, like the whole, I may sound crude, but when women actually wear, even skirts and things like that, they will have slit in their skirts to show who? To show men. Yeah, so it's actually a contradiction. We're going to do everything, our way, and we have women's rights, but they actually do for men. The other point I wanted to actually make is politics actually is one profession where lying is actually legalized. Yeah, you can actually lie, through your teeth and not actually get caught or accounted for. And it's actually well known for that. It's not actually in the best interest of the people.
I mean, is there a law in democracy that really, when politicians don't deliver on their manifesto promises, is there a law that holds them to account? There isn't. Why is that the case?
Because manifestos aren't legally binding.
Exactly. So really, I mean, what are these promises worth?
This is why it's a legal profession where you can lie and you can get away with it.
But doesn't Brexit, the fact that we are having Brexit, prove that people can steer the direction? Because people voted for Brexit and the government has to deliver.
You see, Brexit wasn't an election. Brexit was a referendum, which is slightly different. Where you're given a decision. You decide between two options. Where it is very clear. But when you're actually voting parties in.
Yeah,
you're not really, you don't really determine any policies or any sense of direction for the nation itself. You're just choosing the least hated person, if you know what I mean, yeah? Because they're all hated people, all these politicians and these political parties, they're hated people because they're all liars. They're all a bunch of liars, right? That will tell you one thing, right? Because they want a favor, they want support, they want to be, take office, and then afterwards.
And this is the problem with democracy, which is that every time elections within democracy is always a protest vote. So when people vote for Labour, it's not necessarily they support Labour, they just hate Conservatives more. And when they vote for Conservatives at a particular time, it's because they hate Labour more. So every vote is a protest vote.
Would you say that's why Liberal Democrats maybe didn't do too well last general election? Because they supported the tuition fees, whereas in the manifesto was that they're not going to support tuition fees.
And this is another proof of how politicians did lie in the past, and they still lie, and will lie in the future. When they did actually say, for example, that they were not going to actually allow tuition fees to go ahead. But when they were in the coalition government, we found that Nick Clegg actually gave in to the idea of charging students tuition fees. And I think Theresa May has called this election now. She clearly realizes that Labour is in disarray, and she clearly knows that she is in 20% ahead of the polls of Labour, and she knows that she is not going to have another situation where she will be in a coalition government. It will be an outright majority, and she has taken this stance, knowing fully well that if she takes this stance now, yes, she will be Conservative will be an outright majority who is going to actually pass laws without any without their hand being tight, any hindrance, either from the Liberal Democrats or from the Labour. And it also makes sure that the next 5 years there's no elections for them, because they can actually run for the next 5 years making rules and laws. And if you look at all these rules and laws, the Green Paper, the White Paper, most of these bills actually come from corporate, and pressure groups and lobbies. They don't actually necessarily come from people. People don't actually say that, okay, can you pass this bill for us? This is what we want to make change. Can you do it? If you look at prevent, terrorism, if you look at all these rules and laws, these are coming from some factions of the society which are pushing the government to enact a law. And if you look at the makeup of the parliament, there's two chambers. You got the House of Lords and you have the House of Commons, and the MPs debate a law. And they actually tussle to and fro between these two chambers, and in the end they come up with a law. And these laws are not necessarily called by the people.
It's very interesting, because my main question...
Can I just add one point? This House of Lords is not even appointed by the people. Yep. Do you see? So it goes to show that there is an establishment there that is completely undemocratic within.
But even when it comes to electing a party, what's interesting is in this society, in democratic Western societies, there's a depoliticized mentality, and there's a strong celebrity culture, and that feeds through to politics. So people would gravitate to people like Donald Trump in America. People would gravitate to Le Pen in France. People gravitate towards Theresa May. Everyone focuses on these iconic figures, and what that does is, a case in point is America, the US. When George Bush comes into power, if the American establishment does something that's unpopular for the American public, what they can do is they can shift the blame completely on this individual. They then change face, have another leader, let's just say, but the policies remain the same.
Exactly.
So for a really...
That's interesting, because my next question, as I was saying, was related to this, the rise of the right. Why do you think that there is this rise of the right, whether it's in America or in Britain? I've read a few articles here and there, and they seem to allude to maybe the politicians finding it difficult to answer people's questions, give solutions. So these, soundbite sounds good.
That's right. Yeah, I mean.
What's interesting is that, particularly for Muslims living in the West or living in Britain, for example, irrespective whether Labour has been in power or whether Conservatives have been in power, the media outlets, whether it's radio, whether it's magazines, newspapers, they have been outwardly and openly Islamophobic, irrespective whether Conservative were in power or whether Labour was in power. That has never changed.
Okay.
And what you find is, during the course of those years, when Labour came to power or whether Conservatives came to power, there's always been a strong attempt through legislation to control how people speak in terms of political correctness. And they've bent over backwards for the LGBT community. They've bent over backwards in terms of for feminism, as an example. But over the decades, they haven't not.
They said that Labour was a very right-wing leadership, whereas Corbyn is more left and maybe more supportive of the Muslims?
Well, this is the point. This is the issue with different parties. They're unpredictable. So, for example, with Conservatives, they're meant to be centre-left. Whereas with Labour, they're meant to be Conservatives are centre-right. Yeah. Labour is meant to be centre-left. But what we found with Tony Blair, when he came to power, he shifted the Labour Party towards centre-right, which was very strange. He's the one who took Britain to war in the Muslim world, in Iraq, as an example. We take America as an example as well. When George Bush, he was the centre-right party, the Republicans, he was replaced with Obama. Yet many policies, for example, military schools which were opened up in poor, deprived areas in the US, was supported by Obama. He carried on the policies of the opposition party.
Okay.
So it goes to show the division between whether you're centre-left or centre-right, that distinction isn't even there anymore. And actually, if you look across Europe, for example, the difference between left-wing and right-wing in terms of Muslims, there is no distinction. In fact, the left-wing will always pander on about women's rights and will use this as a hammer on the Muslim community. So, for example, the Freedom Party in Holland, just as an example, it's led by Geert Wilders, who started off the YouTube, the YouTube video about innocence of blood, whatever it's called, and he essentially always stoked anger against Muslims. But he always did this within a left-wing pretense, which is that Muslims are homophobic, Muslims mistreat women. So the right wing and the left wing, especially in Holland and Denmark, for example, during the cartoons, when there was the cartoons about Prophet Muhammad, at that time there was an issue of they were protesting, if you don't like freedom of speech, leave the country. So they were defending left-wing principles, but they were also right-wing. So you begin to see the left wing and the right wing, they're beginning to merge. So you see that connection. So when it comes to Muslim, the left wing are not so far off from the right wing anyway.
Okay.
Can I just make a point about, earlier on you said that, if we were in Saudi Arabia, we'll get locked up. But here, democracy allows you to actually voice your opinions, and you can actually get the demands of the people,
Yes.
met. I just wanted to show you that, the word democracy, doesn't necessarily give you a peaceful nation. It doesn't necessarily mean that this nation is a just nation. I just wanted to give you some evidence. For example, do you know that Saudi Arabia was actually founded by Britain? Yeah, Britain after the First World War was the first nation to actually accept Saudi Arabia as a country. And for example, in Darin, in Treaty of Darin, Britain actually made sure that it will protect that country that it is given birth to. Also in 1927, in Treaty of Jeddah, it was the first, Britain actually first recognized Saudi as a state. And moreover, you have 17.5 billion or billions of dollars of arms deal with Saudi Arabia even at the moment. You've got these diplomatic relations, you got through the BAE systems, all these Eurofighters and Typhoons has been transported, sold to Saudi, and this Saudi government is actually killing and maiming people, innocent people in Yemen, and Britain is actually turning a blind eye. So can we actually say that because Britain is actually a democratic country, this is why it's a just country? No, it's actually colluding with oppressive nations throughout the world. And we know how, for example, it actually commits rendition flights, smuggles people and sends them to other parts of the world, like Egypt, like Saudi Arabia, where they can be tortured in those countries. It's a proxy game. For example, like when Maliki does something in Iraq, they say, oh, Maliki did this. Not telling the people in the media that it was Maliki that they actually promoted in Iraq as a premier. So they do. Democratic countries actually do all sorts of backhand jobs through proxy.
Can we blame our current politicians for what our previous politicians have done in the name of democracy?
Well, what in the Western world, yeah?
Yes.
Well, the thing is democracy is very sloganistic, right? And we tend to look at it at face value. We look at the Western world and we say at face value things are working, right? So this surely is better than a dictatorship. But what we need to realize, going beyond and looking beyond that illusion, we begin to see that democracy, with all its beauty, with all its glamour and wealth, that's just the tip of the iceberg, right? Dictatorships like Saudi Arabia and democracies like the UK, it's all part of the democratic system.
Exactly.
Britain, with its economic strength, actually requires countries like Saudi Arabia. A lot of torture of suspects cannot take place in the UK, hence the rendition to Saudi Arabia. Same thing exists with France, rendition of French citizens to Algeria. So these democracies, their very existence, their political stability relies on these dictatorships. So what we see when we look at democracy is just the tip of the iceberg. But beneath the sea level is actually the blood and bones of many dictatorships across the globe. And that's actually the true structure of democracy.
When we discuss with people, and I've discussed with so many people, it's always been, elections. Yeah, 4 years is election. This is democracy. So what is democracy then?
Elections.
Actually, true democracy actually never existed anywhere. Even the thousands of years before Jesus Christ, the Greeks actually abandoned it because it actually doesn't make any sense. Because you can't have, people logically cannot actually make decisions for the country, for example. You need experts to make decisions, whether in fields of expertism. And for example, if you have a person, if a gunman is caught by some people, and they want him to be hanged, they, one of the things with republic is actually someone, the state will actually intervene and say, hold on a second, this person needs a trial. You cannot actually hang them. So here we can see that majority, even if the majority say that they want to hang someone, the state can actually intervene and say, no, he needs a fair trial. So democracy in its true sense doesn't work. People don't actually make rules. It's only those people who are in power, they make the rules.
Hang on a second. It's really, really nice. If I can make a choice on every law that affects me, isn't that good?
But that's not possible. That's not a possibility, though, isn't it? I mean, unless you have a referendum on every single issue and every single point, which is quite impossible, yeah.
But even these elections, to be honest, whenever people are annoyed about a certain issue and they open up an election or a referendum, in democracies, all this seems to do is it's a pressure valve. So democracies, they developed from, particularly Western democracies, they started off as theocratic Christian states. They controlled the public through Christian thinking, through the Catholic Church, and so on and so forth. Now they do it through nationalism, patriotism, notions of democracy, freedom, and so on. Take whatever sloganistic label you want to take. Essentially, it's the same thing. Democracy has become a more sophisticated form of dictatorship because the people themselves don't realize actually they have very little control. If as a people, take Britain as an example, we had the largest protests in British history during the Iraq War against the Iraq War, yet the democracy of that time was unable to stop its democratically elected government from going to war. If a democratic public cannot control whether its government goes to war or not, you have absolutely no control in other sectors. It's really simple. And these elections
goes to show, which establishes the very point that we said earlier. It's the corporate rule. And when the corporate has taken a decision to go to war because it is in their interest, then that's exactly what the nation is going to do. And the other point about Saudi and supporting dictatorships and things like this is exactly what this nation will do, because this is in line with the interest of the corporates.
Okay, but would you not say that democracy has developed the Western world? I mean, they have progressed. How come it hasn't done the same thing in the Muslim world?
Well, I'll tell you, democracy, the current political, the current setup, the current state of democracy that we have in the West is a thing that the Western society has evolved to.
Yeah.
Why this doesn't happen in the Muslim world is because it is not in line with the viewpoint of the majority of the population in those countries. Yeah, because in the Muslim world you have a population that has a history, that has an identity, has a way of thinking, and that is Islam. So there is 1400 years of Islamic history and Islamic rule, and a complete sort of like a value system of what is right, what is wrong. Do you see? And which comes from, their heritage. In these places, you can't expect democracy. These people to evolve to democracy. That's like.
But we have democracy.
That's supposing. That's supposing. Democracy is a natural evolution, if you like, of human societies, which it isn't.
But the thing is, what we're discussing. See, because people confuse democracy with secularism, right? If we say that in the Muslim world, the people, democracy, there's nothing wrong with them having elections.
That's exactly the point. So you'll find that there are many political parties that talk about democracy in the Muslim world, and what you'll find is that majority of these so-called democrats in the Muslim world, they're not actually referring to the secular democracy of the West. They're actually talking about representative government. They're talking and not dictatorship. They're talking about accountability. They're talking about transparency, fairness. Yes, some of these things may appear to exist in the West, So therefore you may talk about the similarities. But ultimately, they're talking about, they want to live by their values in an open, transparent society where there's accountability of the government, and the government that they will appoint themselves as the people.
Yeah, but why hasn't there been progress?
Can I just come on?
Why there hasn't been progress? Sorry, if I can
just,
just... Yeah.
You can come back.
Okay.
Abomad has been quiet for a while.
The thing is, let's define democracy. Democracy is rule of the people, they say, by the people, for the people, yeah?
They say.
But that's what they say. But in actual reality, we find that every general election is only certain sloganistic, slogans from politicians which they champion at that time. And on that bandwagon, people who don't even understand the policies, they actually vote a particular government in because they like probably the logo of that government. Yeah, maybe, Liberal Democrats are yellow with a bird in it. Or, for example, the Labour government with the red flower in it, or because my neighbour is actually, voting for Labour, so I'm going to vote for Labour. Or my mom said she's voting for Labour, this is why I'm going to vote. So it's on a superficial level. It's not on an informed level. People actually vote certain governments.
But even
even in the past, people in the past, the people voted for like things like unity and fairness and justice. Now democratic countries, like Britain, has become voting for on the basis of scaremongering. Let's say immigration, or they're taking all our jobs, or we want to come up from the Brussels and things like that. So it's not necessarily on an informed and intelligent choices that people are making. No, it's just on a shallow sloganistic basis. But coming back to, for example, does democracy actually bring progress? Democracy doesn't necessarily, from the face of it, democracy is not bringing actually progress. What brings progress is a fair system of management where people actually agree on a particular system and they want to abide by the system.
Okay.
So when people actually agree on a system and they want to abide by a system, and it's the system that they have come up with to run their affairs, that system will work, and any system that works will bring about progress. But we need to actually differentiate progress, tranquility, and etc. Yeah.
Okay, I'll come back to that.
That's another
That's interesting
discussion.
point that you made. Progress is a result of the nation's thinking rather than a nation adopting democracy.
Yeah.
Would you agree to that?
Because China, for example, is progressing at the moment, and China is not necessarily purely democratic country. And now everyone is fearful of China. China's economic growth, China's military growth, China's influence in the world, and we don't see pure democratic process is being in place in China, because we say that Britain is the mother of all democracies, not China.
Okay, I want to go back a little bit. You said that it would be better for experts to rule rather than a group of people who have been elected in a democratic process where everyone has a say. That sounds more to me like dictatorship.
Well,
are you proposing some kind of a different system where how can we trust these people, whoever is going to rule?
Can I just make one point on this? Yeah, what you find with democracy, right, is it's so ambiguous in the sense that what they really stand for or what they will actually deliver, that people are having to fight, or people are at each other's throat, right, for basic needs, really basic. So you're talking about housing, you're talking about food, even basic income, you're fighting for tuition fees. I mean, these things, if you have to fight for these things and not see these things as rights, it's really pathetic. It's a really pathetic society where you have to fight for these basic things, all right? Where a system should be in place that is very clear, very transparent in terms of what it should deliver and what it must deliver. And this is why I would argue that, we have Islam, for example. Islam has made it very clear. This is a question, because I want to look at the process. Because whether it's the experts ruling or you have these elected people, how do you ensure they don't look after their own interest? Is there a different system that you're proposing? Or how do you ensure that the basic needs and rights of the citizens are met? And how are you going to take them to account for these things? Do you see? So, I mean, if I have to fight and argue and vote in order to secure, education for my children, for example, that is really pathetic. Do you see? And this is where you will find that there are many democratic nations that are actually failing the people at the lower end of their society. So, there are, even here in the UK, you will find so many food banks opening up over the last few years that, people with proper jobs are unable to even provide food for their family. And they're having to go into these food banks for additional support.
But
while they're doing
any system, Brother Nidan, any system where man is ruling, you can have this kind of things, isn't it? Because they make the laws, and the laws will benefit those people who have helped that person get into power.
Yeah, I wanted to respond to, there's something the brother was saying about how
of course you can.
There's superficial thinking within the sometimes people may superficially choose a party, and there's two things to do with that. Even if people were to choose intellectually, were to understand the manifesto of different parties, the problem is those manifestos are not legally binding, and the parties have a tendency of always doing a U-turn. So even if you're a staunch supporter of Labour, and you voted for them at the time when Tony Blair came to power, you're expecting Labour to act as a centre-left party. But under Tony Blair, the Blairites, they were centre-right. So essentially you can't, even if you are informed as a Lib Dem supporter or as a Conservative supporter or a Labour supporter, it's not guaranteed you're going to get what you're voting for. So even if you do it intellectually, but even if we look at the superficial, the argument about, voters may be a bit superficial in their choice, there's something that a champion of democracy, Winston Churchill himself, he said, although he himself was not democratically elected, he came to power by necessity during the war. But he said about democracy, if you wanted, I'm paraphrasing here, if you want an argument, if you want a debate...
Now the best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter.
Okay, we understand. You might not get what you want with democracy because there is a lot of lie, a lot of interest and all that involved. You said about experts ruling. How would it actually work? Wouldn't they be affected by the same effects? Meaning, instead of one set of dictators, you've got a different set of dictators. Could you elaborate? Is it Islam proposing a different system altogether?
What I'm trying to say is that in a democracy, you don't have experts, ruling. You don't have, from the people's side, informed choices of what policies should go ahead and what policies should not go ahead. It's not based on intelligence. It's rather based superficially, like logos or what's my friends actually voting for. Those kind of superficial levels that people actually vote. People actually don't vote based on expertism. Yeah, even if they were to actually based on expert choices or expert decisions. Informed decisions.
But is there an alternative system that you're thinking about when you talk about expert choice?
Yes. Even then, for example, this democratic nation, let's say all the people are experts in the choices that they make. But because people don't actually carry, for example, accountability, because people don't actually feel that they are accountable by God, and God has prescribed to them a certain lifestyle, certain criteria of action, certain do's and don'ts, people can always be bought, people can be bribed, people can be pressured by their lives, or people can be pressured with money, people can be pressured with all sorts of other benefits. Therefore, again, you will not have a nation that is based on making policies for the interest of people, but they will be making policies for the interest of themselves. And we can see that, for example, like when USA went to Iraq war, it was basically because of Halliburton. It was based on other, Shell or this and that.
So, Brother Samad, is there an alternative system that can secure the rights of the people?
Absolutely. I mean, before I answer that one, I just wanted to add. Who is funding all these? And so all these corruption that you've listed, you will find that within the democratic system, these have legalized means and legalized terms. Do you see? So you'll find that all these political parties are actually funded, supported by these corporates, even by foreign companies even, that would fund your political parties here in democratic societies, and it's all legal and it's all, monitored, and it's, but effectively it's bribe. It's actually steering the direction of the government.
Okay.
So I mean, isn't that corruption? That is corruption, but it's all legalized. So
are you proposing
I'm proposing
society where you don't have any of this corruption?
No, human beings are prone to sort of like, errors, prone to corruption, these things are part and parcel of human beings.
Yes.
But the best guarantee, the best security that we have is a system that is defined, that it doesn't change. Do you see? That is fixed. So, and every citizen.
Way,
I'll give you an example. Every citizen will know what their rights and what their what their rights and what they should expect from their government. You see, and that is guaranteed under Islam, and nobody needs to tell you this because it's already there, stated in the Quran, in the Sunnah. Do you see?
The Islamic system.
Exactly, the Islamic system is a guarantee, in the sense that
what does it guarantee?
It guarantees, for example, it guarantees basic, your shelter, your clothing, your food. You see, and recently we've had additions. I don't know how, if these things are, very clearly stated in the Sunnah or the Quran. But we talk about education and healthcare and things like this as well. Do you see? So as a citizen, I don't care who the government is, which party it is. I don't want to have to, cast a vote because I want NHS. I don't want to have to cast a vote because I need education. I should have these things guaranteed, regardless of what government is, which party goes in, who is appointed. Do you see? So these things are already very, and even the laws. Even the laws are made very clear. So therefore, there's not much there for whoever goes in. In power, all they have is really administration. Do you see? But now we have a system where, they legalize persecution, they legalize, crimes,
Cannabis.
they legalize this, they legalize that,
Cannabis.
or they prescribe, what is, a right. So, like for example, Muslims, they're prescribed from this or prescribed from that. Do you see? And what kind of system is this? There's no clarity. There's no sort of like fixed moral compass.
There's an accusation, right, which is that if you form a form of government which is bonded to scripture, as an example, or certain principles, the danger is that there are representatives of that faith, a theocracy, let's just say as an example, who will bend the rules of religion, will manipulate religion, and will basically abuse power over the people. But the thing to realize is, in a man-made system where you don't even have any written principles, okay, it's even easier.
It's lethal.
It's even easier for a politician to invent whatever they want, because they're not even held into account by scholars of religion. Do you see? So it becomes very, very easy. Now, accusations such as, the church in Christianity in Europe, historically, the abuses what they carried out. The problem is that's the grandfather of the modern day system today. So the establishment has thrown the cross, has thrown, Christian slogans for democratic slogans, but they're still manipulating the masses, but just under another slogan. Do you see?
There's a slight difference in the sense that, with Islam, because with Christianity, you had a problem where religion was what was dictated by the church. Do you see? So they didn't really have a very clear scripture. Do you see? Whereas in Islam, there's no concept of clergy that decides what Islam is.
Okay.
Because anyone has access. Everyone has access to the scriptures, and everyone has the opportunity to look into it and investigate it and learn it, and then and use it to account. Do you see?
Yeah, I would like to move on to my next question. Okay, so we talked about democracy as corporate controlling. You gave us example of Islam, maybe with the system that is known. basic rights that they will get. What's wrong with corporate controlling? As long as the people are not oppressed and the people are happy, yeah, doesn't that? Why would people want to choose a different system or go a different way?
Yeah, but when you say
people don't like
as-
change. People don't like change. We've got a certain
No,
system.
people do like
It's
change.
working.
Actually, we had Obama coming in, claiming that he will bring change. All right, and he brought no change. All right, so people actually want change. People have voted Trump in because they believe that he will deliver change. All right, because people were fed up of this, these mainstream politicians, that they thought, oh, this guy is different. He's not your mainstream politician. He will deliver something better. But the thing,
irony is
the irony is that what he's done is given the biggest tax break to the corporates. This is so effectively he's actually a part of the establishment himself.
Do you think the people are oppressed?
I mean, the thing is, whether people are oppressed or not oppressed, only Allah can actually, decide that. Allah can actually, inform us human beings what is oppression, what is not oppression. So, for example, you're saying that what's wrong with people actually voting in corporates to actually, rule the country. When this happens, we can see the mess. For example, you have, the Conservative Party privatizing everything and anything under the sun. So you have the privatization of the rail, you have the privatization of the water, privatization of the universities, you have the privatization of oil and gas,
NHS.
and NHS and everything. They're talking about now, for example, if you were to actually make a appointment with the GP, you need to pay a fee. If you were to actually go to the A&E, you need to show your whatever. So the thing is, and also the rail fares, every year they're going up. So actually democracy is actually a parasite on the back of human beings, and it's actually all the time sucking their blood. Yeah, and what I mean by that is that it's making man work tirelessly day and night for the benefit of corporates, so that it can actually oil the engines and the factories of the corporate nations. So for example, we all work 9 to 5. The work may be 9 to 5, but we're coming home and doing a lot of homeworks. As teachers, for example, you're working right until 10 o'clock. You're working during the weekends as well. So it's constantly working. You don't have any time for your children. This is why a lot of people want to actually go on part-time, but they can't.
I have a glass of water. Would you like to add anything?
Yeah.
Other people oppressed under democracy, and should they be looking at alternatives?
I think, first of all, we can't escape the clear-cut reality that most people have. This classic view, which is there's all this moaning, complaining about democracies, but if we look at America, we look at Canada, UK, France, it looks like paradise compared to the rest of the world. If you look at democracies, Western democracies, but at the same time, we need to realise that there are other democracies. Pakistan is technically a democracy. Bangladesh is a democracy. Yet these countries have not achieved the same change that Western democracies have. And then we have to raise the question as to why. And then we can look at democracy not at superficial level, but how come France as a democracy became powerful and wealthy? Why did the UK become powerful and wealthy as a democracy with its elections? And the simple answer is this. Centuries before Britain even had elections or any form of democracy, it was already a superpower. Centuries before France had elections, it was already a superpower.
Yeah.
So you begin to realise, before the average Bob and Dave had the right to vote, the country was already a superpower, and it actually had nothing to do with elections. So you see, even with the suffragettes in 1918, when women were allowed to vote, it was actually limited to women who owned property. A lot of the men had died in the war, so wealthy women who owned property, the aristocrats, were now allowed to vote. And not many women owned properties back then. So actually the number of women who were allowed to vote post 1918 wasn't actually that much. So you begin to see the same thing with, you mentioned earlier about slavery, democracy and slavery. America ended slavery because it became an economic necessity. America had to transition away from a farming-based economy to become industrialized. That's the only reason they did it. There was a state state-sponsored reason to get rid of slavery. There was a state-sponsored reason to allow women into the workplace. It's these necessities that brought about the changes. It was nothing to do with Bob and Dave had the right to vote. It had nothing to do with that.
Conscious of the time, we're reaching the end of time. I would like to ask another question, which is, so what is the best way to stay active as Muslims? We have to be active in society, all of us know. What can we do?
I think
what should be our stance in these elections?
Yeah, I think as Muslims, we need to be at the forefront of actually presenting the alternative, rather than feeding into this corrupt system, believing that we will achieve some petty sort of like benefits from this. We need to think broader, think bigger, you see, and not get sucked into the system through petty interests. And it's unfortunate, but yes, our community does, tend to get very much, engaged and go right into the system, So as Muslims, we have an alternative. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the alternative. And this alternative is Islam. If as Muslims we're not going to present this, then who is? You see? So really we should look to our responsibility with a greater interest and try to understand, the value of this thing. Because this is the very thing that is needed in the society today. Because this voter apathy says one thing. It says that there are people who are desperate in this society even that are looking for an alternative. And this alternative has been given to us from Islam, and I hope the Muslim community can rise up, to this level where they can present this alternative to humanity.
Going to the voter apathy, democracy is actually dying. It's a dying system. Basically, the government is actually trying tirelessly to actually win or get support from the masses. It's trying to actually reduce the voter age from 18 to 16. It's actually going for the ethnic minorities. One of the reasons why we find that Muslims become very politically active during the general elections. Otherwise, politics is not part of Islam, according to some Muslims, which we know that Islam is a comprehensive system. It has a political system, and Muslims should be politically engaged. But some Muslims peddle the line that we should not talk about politics in the mosque, we shouldn't talk about politics and religion. But when it comes to the general elections, they are very active. It's because the government is actually pressurizing certain sections of the Muslim community to actually campaign hard for this system. It's because there is a voter apathy. 70% sometimes we find that the British indigenous people are not voting. They're trying to actually raise the voter legalization age from 18 down to 16. It's because of that. It's a dying process. It's a dying system, and what we need to actually tell.
Even if it's a dying system, it's the best system we have.
This is why. This is the harm.
This is a flawed argument.
Can I come back, please? This is the more of a reason why Muslims should not actually engage in the system. By engaging in this system, they are actually reviving. They're resuscitating the system. It's like having the battery in a dying person and giving them the shock so that the person can wake. So they're trying to put this battery onto the democratic system and saying that keep awake by engaging in it. What we need to do, is we need to come away from engaging in that system, and we need to call for an alternative. Because like the brother was saying, that not only that Islam actually provides food, clothing and shelter, but if you look at the maqasid of Sharia, maqasid of the Sharia actually, the objective of the Sharia is that it protects the minds of the people, meaning that it will not give you alcohol and then allow you to get smash your head down, binge drinking and get smacked by other people.
And
it will protect and then complain about it, and it will not allow you to actually, for example, it actually protects your property as well. Protection of mind, protection of the property, protection of the honor. We find that women in this society don't have any honor because they can't say whether they are raped or they are not raped, because they said, hold on, we can't actually come to a clear-cut conclusion because we were freely mixing. What sort of society is that? So Islam gives protection of honor, property, mind, and life all sorts of things. So we don't have to call for this system. We need to rather come away from this system and call for the alternative, which is Islam.
One that guarantees. One that
all
guarantees.
that. One that actually
In
comes,
black and white, it guarantees
one that
all
has,
these things.
been revealed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who knows what is right and who knows what is wrong, who knows what is oppression, who knows what is justice. This is the system that we should be calling for.
We currently don't have that system in the Muslim world, do we? Because a lot of people say that you Muslims, if you don't like democracy, if you don't like the way things are in the West, even though you live here, then why don't you go back to the
But we don't like the way things are in the East either.
Yeah, exactly. And the reason is that the 57 Muslim states, they don't have this Islamic system anyway. People tend to look at things.
But these 57 Muslim states are proxy.
People tend to look at things in a very superficial way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if they see, for example, minarets in the Muslim world, they instantly assume, oh, it's an Islamic form of governance, but it isn't. If we take Bangladesh, Pakistan as examples, they're democracies, but they will not enjoy the wealth that Britain and France enjoys, because Britain and France's wealth did not come about through elections. It did not come about through democracy. It came about through other means.
Through slavery,
so when you look at these histories,
colonization.
So when you look at that history, you begin to realize the true ingredients behind what caused Western democracy specifically to become wealthy.
I mean, we need to actually also debunk some of the arguments that Muslims propose when it comes to elections. For example, some Muslims, because sometimes some Muslims would actually say that, look, you're actually residing in their country. If you don't actually vote in this system, the system will not work for the common good of all the people. So by virtue of staying in their country, surely you should actually vote. But my argument here is that, we are not staying in their country. First of all, I need to look at my life is in the...
We'll leave that discussion about voting for another time.
Yeah.
Would you, Brother Samad, would you like to say final words in terms of, if I'm an activist in society and I carry Islam and its elections, obviously I don't want to discuss whether I should vote or not to vote, but what is it I should go to the society with, whether it's Muslims or non-Muslims?
Actually, I read an article done by Brother Andalusi.
Yes.
And I took a quote from there, and I thought it was really, really good. Maybe I'll read this out. On what you're saying is, on polling day, unplug yourself from the matrix, all right, and make the biggest political statement you can, all right. And a no vote is actually making a statement. A no vote is actually a vote of no confidence, and that I think
this is a very, very good
I think is the key. This is the position that Muslims should take.
Brother Samad is saying, unplug yourself from the matrix. You've been listening to Straight Talk on the YouTube channel and on Facebook. Join us again when we have other discussions of similar type. I was presenting. My name is Khairul Islam. Assalamu alaikum.